This is tutorial video number 11, and it presents the updated minimum requirements schedule template and how to update an existing schedule to satisfy the design phase scheduling bulletin. The design phase engineering directive states that each permit required for a project shall be scheduled and tracked as separate activities. The issue with satisfying this requirement is that there was not a clear, standardized method for permit drafting, review, and issuance. To support project managers in satisfying this requirement, AEC applications worked with the Office of Environmental Planning and the Environmental Permit Coordination Unit to map out the permitting process using Microsoft Project. To open the revised template, go to the Scheduling Directive folder in ProjectWise and open the file. You will notice that two new tasks have been added to the schedule. One is the preliminary right-of-way task, and the second is the permit needs determination form task. Another modification is that task durations have been set to be days for when the lead unit is the task resource, and are set to months or weeks for when a task resource is completed by a support unit or an outside entity. This was done to highlight that project managers should not be adjusting durations for tasks that they are not responsible for executing. For example, the survey task is shown as 3 months because the central surveys unit estimates that this is the typical duration needed to perform a survey, whereas develop PD through design approval is in days because the project manager is responsible for executing the task and therefore may adjust it as necessary. A project manager should only change another resource's task duration after they have coordinated and received approval to deviate from the typical duration. It should also be noted that if any task listed in any schedule template is not anticipated, the project manager should delete the task or set the duration to 1 day and add a note stating that the task is not anticipated. The third update was to change the naming convention and rearrange predecessor connectivity for final design right-of-way coordination tasks. Specifically, the first subtask is now Prepare and Submit Property Maps, and the second task is Acquire Properties. The predecessor tasks to acquire properties is now set so that the task can begin 3 weeks after design approval. During this 3-week period, the lead designer should be working with the right-of-way coordinator and central surveys to prioritize the generation of critical path property maps. After 3 weeks, the right-of-way phase is typically initiated and the Office of Rights-of-Way may begin work to acquire any critical properties. A second predecessor is that there is a 6-month lag time in between the completion of Prepare and Submit Property Maps and the completion of Acquire Properties. This was done to provide a 6-month window in between the final property map submission and the final property acquisition. The estimated average duration for Acquire Properties is set to 12 months. Of course, if a project requires an improved residential or improved commercial acquisition, the project manager should adjust this duration to the appropriate value and then request a new FDP date at project status if necessary. The fourth update is a complete overhaul in the permit acquisition process. Schedule 2.0 presents the typical process involved with common permit generation. Don't be intimidated by the number of tasks. 90% of the permit tasks will be deleted once a project reaches design approval and the needed permits are identified. This template presents a typical process. Obviously, durations are subject to change based on the number of review iterations needed to adequately address all review comments. Division templates will be revised to reflect all of the changes presented in this bulletin. The only immediate action required by project managers is to update your existing schedules with the revised permit acquisition tasks as needed. For example, if you do not know what permits your project will require, then you should insert the entire revised permit section, wait until the PNDF or design approval is complete, and then delete all the extraneous permits from your schedule. Or, if you already know which permits you will need, you should copy the relevant permits and insert them into your existing schedule. Or, if your project is not anticipated to need permits, you should delete the permit acquisition process or enter the duration as 1 day and write a note that says no permits anticipated. To update your existing schedule, first you need to copy the updated permit tasks from the permit acquisition process schedule. To do this, right-click on the task indicator column to the far left and select Copy. Then go back to your existing schedule, write down the existing FDP date, right-click on the task below the existing permit acquisition process summary task, and select Paste. You can see that the updated process has been inserted. Next, delete the old permit acquisition process by right-clicking and select Delete Task. Next, you want to link the permit tasks with the rest of the schedule. The first task for all the permits is typically draft permit, which is the task that needs an assigned predecessor. Typically, the predecessor to drafting a permit is design approval. To assign the predecessor, look at the task indicator column to the left and note the number associated with design approval. In this schedule, the task ID number is 9. Now I go down to the permit list and enter 9 into the predecessor column for all draft permit tasks. The permits are now linked into the schedule. In my schedule, I notice that the individual Army Corps permit and the U.S. Coast Guard permit are now the critical path, which has resulted in my schedule being pushed out about 2 weeks from my original FDP. I'm still in initiation phase, so I'm not certain if I'm going to need an individual Army Corps permit. I do, however, know that I won't need a Coast Guard permit or a dam permit, so I delete the summary tasks. Now, to still make my current FDP date, I still need to shave off some time on my critical path. To do this, I go into my schedule and I reduce the duration for the tasks that I'm responsible for executing until I reach my baseline FDP. And now that I have backed into my current FDP, I'm going to re-baseline to capture the updated schedule. To do that, first I save my current baseline. Then I set my new baseline. If you anticipate that you cannot meet your FDP deadline, you will need to bring up the issue at the next project status meeting. The Permit Needs Determination Form, or PNDF, indicates which permits are required for a project. The PNDF permit section should be completed prior to design approval, so that once design approval is attained, permit creation can begin. Therefore, when a project enters final design, a project manager should go into the permit acquisition process and delete all extraneous permits. In this example, I'm going to need an individual flood management certification, so I delete all the other flood management certification tasks. I'm going to need a 401 individual, so I delete the PCN. Next, I need the individual inland wetland and watercourse permits, so I delete the general. I delete the stormwater and the coastal permits. And then for my Section 401, Section 10 Army Corps permits, I did end up needing the individual, so I delete the self-verification form and the PCN. The benefit to scheduling in this case is that I now know the critical deadlines for submitting my individual Army Corps permit, and therefore I need to prioritize this permit's development if I'm to keep my FDP. This concludes tutorial number 11. Hopefully you now know what the schedule update entails, and you know how to add the updated permit acquisition tasks to your existing schedule. Thanks for watching.